Good afternoon, everyone. James White, Detroit Police Chief. I took the role of Police Chief in Detroit June 1st of last year after serving 24 years in the city of Detroit. Having gone through bankruptcy in Detroit, retiring to take a job with the state, and then coming back to lead this great department of some of the hardest working men and women in law enforcement. Certainly a humbling and honoring experience for me. Coming back and recognizing what's happening in our country with law enforcement, police chiefs, police departments have to be innovative. You cannot arrest your way out of crime. There has to be community services, community programming, mental health support, and a number of other different programs. Having been an assistant chief at a time when Detroit went through bankruptcy and knowing what that felt like, I'd much rather be the chief when there's the type of investment that we see from the American Rescue Plan for cities like Detroit. It's enabled us to do a number of different things. Number one, put officers in high areas of crime, put officers around our city where we are looking at statistically gun violence being higher in those areas than in other areas in our city. But in addition, is to provide our officers with state-of-the-art training, being able to develop training protocols based on best practices and use our training facility and bring it up to standards that are necessary in this day and age in law enforcement. Making sure that our officers are best equipped to deal with the programming and the issues that we're seeing in our community. One of the most exciting programs that we have is our crisis intervention training and our crisis intervention cars. When I took this role, we had crisis intervention officers in 3 of our precincts. I'm happy to say that today, as a result of the American Rescue Plan dollars, we're able to put it in 6 of our precincts. And by the end of the year, we're hopeful that we'll be in all 12 precincts. And what that does for us is provide a very specific layer of safety, not just for the officers, but for the citizens who are in mental health crisis, by having a trained mental health professional on that car with a trained officer who is trained in mental health intervention. Recognizing what they're looking at, recognizing what they're dealing with when they come upon someone who is in crisis and perhaps engaging in violence or erratic behavior, having those trained officers is an incredible layer of success and layer of equipment that we just did not have prior to this. And one last thing is the training facility and the opportunity to recruit. Right now in policing, recruiting is difficult, and having a state-of-the-art training facility and recruiting opportunity has been instrumental in what we're trying to accomplish in our city. So with that, thank you.
All right, go ahead.
Mayor, it's good to see you again. The Missouri General Assembly just passed a bill just now that increases the percentage of Kansas City's budget that needs to be spent on policing. What's your reaction to the bill, but more importantly, what's your reaction to them passing it while you're here on this very topic?
I think it's always important to have locally driven solutions to local problems. I think that's why the American Rescue Plan was so helpful, money coming directly to cities and to states so we could solve public safety problems. I do not think necessarily that someone in outstate Missouri has better answers for policing than somebody in the core of Kansas City. And what we've been able to do, both with American Rescue Plan funding and our collaboration with folks at the state and federal level, is come to solutions like more officers that my friends in the legislature and the governor are asking for. And so I do not support anything that takes away our ability to work with our local police department and neighborhood leaders in terms of how we get to better solutions for violent crime.
This administration has often talked about funding the police as crucial to not just lowering crime, but also for police reform. I heard talk about crisis intervention training, but did any of the ARP investments that you allocated also go towards implicit bias training or programs that require diversifying the rank and file or active bystander training? Anything that specifically goes towards accountability or oversight?
Yeah, I'll take that. And so in Detroit, we're in the process right now of building out. I've just hired a diversity, equity, and inclusion director. We're constantly looking at our policies. It's enabled me to incorporate a number of different components of diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we already have, but just expanding out and recognizing that we can make improvements. We've been able to do that.
Did that come from ARP? funds?
What it came from was the fact that we did not lose money or we didn't have a budgetary shortfall. So we were able to do some things without losing the dollars if we did not have the money.
But that's essentially like you're talking about a coordinator, somebody that's hired on to.
You're talking about really a process, because for us, it's for all of our officers. There's a coordinator, and then there's a programming from that coordinator that goes out department-wide.
And do you see that as kind of the main method of accountability when it comes to ARP investments, or
No.
a program that enforces accountability?
No, I mean, that's just one of many. You know, when we talk about community engagement, we can't fight crime without our communities. Communities have to have trust. They have to believe in police officers. And certainly this is a time where police trust is super important. And so when you talk about transparency in policing, that's what these training opportunities provide us to look at best practices, to be innovative, and to work on transparency with community.
Last one, Brian.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that a bit, going forward, in your community and other communities like yours, what do you think is the most needed, underfunded need that you have going forward?
Among everything,
Yeah, among everything we were just talking about.
in terms of community trust, you know, I think there was a reason that both of us have talked about recruiting and retaining officers. We want officers that actually have the time to be engaged in communities, time to actually interact with neighborhoods, times to get known by people in the neighborhood. In most cities in America, you're not catching people say, we want to get rid of all the police. In fact, I've caught very few people who have said that. They said they want the way they interact with police to be different. They want somebody who has time to do community interaction. That's why these investments, in my opinion, are so important, because then you build up community trust, which helps you solve crime. It helps you actually build the relationships that you need to long term. And so there's not a single kind of magic program that I think works in terms of getting to any of these issues. It's instead making sure that you're investing somewhat holistically in police departments, having enough officers that you can address things like having an event at the community center, making sure there are people that are following up in neighborhoods, making sure that you have social workers in departments, which many of us have. And that's where these funds, I think, are largely helping us invest in areas where without them, we'd be laying off police officers, cutting social programs, cutting everything that's actually needed to get people to trust the police more.
Do you have one more, Zeke? Go ahead.
Thank you. We're sitting here, and violent crime, gun crime in particular, across the country is at an elevated level heading into the summer. We talked about the risk there. When you go to meet with the president in a few minutes, is there any specific requests that you have from him, from the federal government, for resources or tools that your department, your city need heading into the summer?
Sure. I mean, certainly, you know, we're only one part of the judicial process, right? I mean, we make the arrests. There's our courts, the prosecutor's office. You know, we have a number of different needs. And then there's the intersection of crime with mental illness. And then we certainly recognize that, you know, we have a literacy problem in our country. And so there are a number of different factors that drive crime. By the time someone commits a crime, there's a number of failed systems that has caused that to happen. So we're not going to simply arrest our last person and solve the problem. We have to do a lot of work. So I'll be talking about those types of investments, community support, which we've been able to do with our Ceasefire Detroit, and provide those community programming, because I think that's super important. Mental health is super important. Engaging the courts at a high level is super important, and certainly supporting police officers and making sure that they're properly trained in some of the areas that we've talked about today.